It began, not with a blurry UFO sighting or a grainy leaked video, but with a single photograph. A photograph that would go on to ripple across the internet and ignite one of the most heated debates of our time. The image was clear, undeniable. Several individuals stood outside the entrance of a nondescript building, their identities hidden, their features obscured. Each of them was dressed in full yellow hazmat suits, the kind designed not for routine cleaning or industrial work, but for absolute containment. Their masks sealed their faces, the breathing gear clamped tightly against their mouths and noses, gloves fused to their wrists, and they were not moving. They stood there in silence, as though guarding something, or preparing for an operation that no one on the outside was supposed to witness. At first, those who stumbled upon the photo thought little of it. After all, hazmat suits could mean many things. Maybe it was an environmental spill. Maybe it was a drill. Maybe some chemical plant in Panama had called in a response team for routine containment. But then someone noticed the location. The photo had been taken in Panama. And not just anywhere in Panama, but in the same country where a man named Chin had, only weeks before, claimed to have discovered something beyond imagination, a meteorite unlike any that had ever been seen. Chin was not a scientist, not a government insider, not a celebrity or a politician. He was an ordinary man, an observer who happened to stumble upon something extraordinary. He claimed he had discovered a strange meteorite, a rock that seemed alive, that seemed to pulse with something foreign, something not of this earth. Inside that meteorite, Chin revealed, was a substance. A black goo-like material that moved when it should not, that seemed to grow and shift when locked away. He called it the entity. Others called it the black goo. Chin began uploading videos of the discovery. The footage showed the entity inside a locked safe, filmed under harsh light. For hours, days, weeks, viewers studied the grainy recordings, searching for evidence that Chin was lying. Yet time after time, the goo seemed to move. Sometimes it stretched across the floor of the container. Sometimes it pulsed, as though breathing. At one point, it even seemed to crawl, inching forward like a living organism. The internet was stunned. Could it be a hoax? Clever editing? A trick of lighting? Skeptics rushed to tear his claims apart, dismissing them as fabrication, attention-seeking, or even viral marketing for some unknown project. But still, the videos spread. And still, the black goo seemed alive. And then, just as the debates were reaching their peak, the photograph of the hazmat suit surfaced. To many, this was the confirmation they had been waiting for. Hazmat teams, in Panama, at the same time that Chin had been revealing his meteorite. The timeline was too close, the geography too precise. The idea that it was coincidence seemed almost laughable. Suddenly, what had been dismissed as a strange YouTube curiosity exploded into something far larger. Online forums lit up. Twitter threads stretched for miles. News outlets began to pick up the story. Everyone wanted to know, were these men in hazmat suits there because of Chin's discovery? Memes spread almost immediately, but alongside them came serious speculation. Some users zoomed into every pixel of the photo, trying to identify badges, logos, or insignias on the suits. Others examined the shadows in the background, the vehicles parked nearby, the door that the hazmat team seemed to be guarding. Was this a government operation? A private contractor? International agencies? No one could say for certain, but the theories fell into three distinct camps. The first group argued that the truth was obvious. Chin's meteorite had been discovered, its contents deemed dangerous or important, and now officials were moving to secure it. These hazmat teams were not random responders. They were the vanguard of a confiscation effort. According to this theory, the men in suits would quietly remove the meteorite, lock away the black goo, and ensure that it never saw the light of day again. History, they argued, was repeating itself. Just like Roswell, just like countless other cases where strange phenomena were said to have been erased from the public record, Chin's discovery would be silenced. To this group, the photograph was not just proof of the entity's existence, but proof that a cover-up had already begun. The second group dismissed the alien narrative entirely. To them, the black goo was not a living organism, but a technology, an engineered material, something perhaps created by a civilization far beyond human understanding. The way it shifted and moved suggested not biology, but machinery, nanotechnology, self-replicating matter, a programmable material that could reshape itself in ways humans had only begun to dream about. To this camp, the hazmat suits represented containment not of an alien life form, but of a technology so advanced it could change the world, and that was reason enough for secrecy. If governments or corporations could control it, they could control the future. The third group was the most skeptical. To them, the hazmat suits were real, but the story was theater. They believed the suits were part of a staged event, designed to give the illusion of danger and containment, while the true purpose was far simpler: removal. The black goo, if it existed at all, would soon vanish. Chin's videos would disappear. The meteorite would be gone, locked away somewhere the public would never find. And what would remain? A story, a mystery, a fleeting glimpse into something monumental, erased as though it had never happened. Alongside these three schools of thought came endless speculation about who was really behind it. Some whispered about national security agencies, moving quickly to contain a potential biological hazard. Others suggested scientific organizations eager to secure exclusive research rights. A smaller but louder group spoke of shadow networks, secretive groups outside of government who saw in the black goo not a threat, but an opportunity, a tool for power, for control, for advancement beyond anything the public could imagine. The timing only deepened the mystery, for this was not the first time hazmat suits had appeared in Panama in recent weeks. Only a week earlier, another photo had surfaced, a different group of similarly dressed individuals operating in another part of the country. At the time, it had been dismissed. Perhaps it was environmental cleanup, perhaps medical safety. But now, with Chin's story unfolding and the second photo tied so closely in time and place, people began to connect the dots. Were these appearances isolated incidents, or coordinated operations, slowly moving across the country, tightening the net around Chin's meteorite and the black entity it contained? Chin's followers grew more urgent, more desperate for answers. Each new update from him was devoured by an audience convinced that time was running out. Would officials intervene to silence him? Would the videos suddenly stop? Already, his decision to lock the goo inside a safe suggested he understood the danger, or at least the value, of what he had found. But if others wanted it, if others were already on the ground in Panama, how long before it was taken from him? The debate shifted. It was no longer about whether the goo was real. That question had already been answered in the minds of many. The real debate was about consequences. If it was alive, then humanity was witnessing the first open documentation of extraterrestrial life. If it was technological, then the world stood on the edge of a discovery that could rewrite the very fabric of science. And if it was seized and hidden, then history would once again record nothing, leaving only rumors, grainy photographs, and whispers of what might have been. One thing was undeniable: the global reaction. The photograph of the hazmat suits in Panama spread like wildfire. It reached every corner of the internet, sparking conversations on forums, news sites, YouTube channels, and TikTok feeds. The image captured something primal: the sight of anonymous figures in protective gear, standing silently, while an unfolding alien mystery gripped the world. It evoked fear, suspicion, and wonder all at once. For those who believed, it was proof. For those who doubted, it was a distraction. But for everyone, it was impossible to ignore. And as Chin's videos continued, watched with growing anticipation, the world found itself holding its breath. Was this the beginning of a revelation, or the beginning of another cover-up? Would the black goo emerge as humanity's first true encounter with extraterrestrial life, or would it be erased, leaving behind only the memory of a photograph and the suspicion that something extraordinary had slipped once again through the cracks of public awareness? What began with a strange video on Chin's channel had grown into a worldwide mystery. And the question was no longer, is it real? The question now was, who wants it? The photograph of hazmat suits in Panama was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Chin's videos began to take on a new intensity. What had once been a curiosity, a strange black liquid shifting inside a safe, suddenly seemed like the center of a global mystery. His audience swelled. Where his earlier uploads had been shared among niche communities, his channel now drew hundreds of thousands of new viewers, each one desperate to catch even the smallest new glimpse of the entity. The footage itself hadn't changed much, at least on the surface. The camera angle was the same. Fixed, steady, always locked onto the safe that housed the meteorite and its strange contents. But what the camera captured began to shift in ways that made even longtime followers uneasy. The black goo no longer sat idle, pulsing faintly. It began to move with intent. It crawled toward the edge of the container, pressing against the steel walls. In some frames, it seemed to rise like a shadow forming the outline of a hand, a face, a body. Skeptics dismissed these as tricks of the eye, confirmation bias fueled by fear and imagination. But to believers, the footage was proof. Whatever Chin had found was learning, adapting, perhaps even aware. Debates raged across the internet. Was the black goo a living entity, some form of alien life sealed within the meteorite and awakened by its fall to Earth? Was it a parasite, an organism designed to infiltrate and adapt to whatever environment it encountered? Or was it something more sinister, a technology, not alive in the traditional sense, but operating with intelligence nonetheless? Chin himself offered few answers. His narration in the videos remained cautious, almost clinical. He explained what he saw but never speculated. He admitted he was afraid, that the entity seemed to be growing stronger, but he stopped short of declaring it alive. Instead, he let the footage speak for itself. And it was the ambiguity of his restraint that drove his audience wild. Each viewer projected their own theories onto the videos, each interpretation fueling new waves of discussion. The contradictions in reports only deepened the mystery. On one hand, some followers swore they saw the goo responding to Chin's voice, moving faster when he spoke, retreating when he fell silent. Others claimed the substance emitted faint sounds, scratching, tapping, though the microphone never picked them up. Still others believed the goo was not autonomous at all, but simply reacting to environmental changes, temperature shifts, vibrations, light. But if that was true, why did it move in ways that looked so deliberate? Why did it seem at times to form shapes that resembled human anatomy? And then came the eyewitness accounts. People in Panama began to post their own sightings. Strange lights in the sky. Convoys of unmarked trucks moving through rural areas at night. Helicopters circling fields for hours. Some reported hearing a low hum, a vibration that seemed to settle in their bones, even though no machines were visible. Others described seeing hazmat suits not once, but multiple times. Different teams, in different regions, operating in secrecy. Yet these reports clashed. Some claimed the suits were worn by government officials. Others said they were foreign, American, Russian, Chinese, depending on the rumor. A few insisted they were private contractors, mercenaries hired by corporations seeking to secure Chin's discovery. The contradictions only fueled suspicion. If the reports didn't align, was it because misinformation was being spread deliberately? Or was it simply that people were seeing what they wanted to see? Still, the pattern was undeniable. Something was happening in Panama, something far larger than a single man's YouTube channel. And Chin's black goo was at the heart of it. As speculation spread, so too did the stakes. Scientists began to weigh in. Some dismissed the videos outright, calling them fakes. Others admitted that while they were skeptical, the footage was unnerving. A handful of biologists argued that if the goo was real, it could represent a form of extremophile life, surviving inside a meteorite, dormant until exposed to Earth's environment. Physicists countered that the behavior looked more mechanical than biological. The way it stretched and retracted seemed too precise, too efficient, more like nanotechnology than organic tissue. And through it all, Chin remained silent on the theories. He released footage but gave no commentary on what it meant. This silence, whether intentional or born of fear, only fueled more obsession. People began to dissect not only the goo, but Chin himself. Who was he? Why was he the one to find this meteorite? Did he stumble upon it by chance, Or was he part of something larger? Some accused him of being a plant, a pawn in a staged operation meant to test public reaction to alien life. Others saw him as a whistleblower, risking everything to reveal the truth. Meanwhile, the hazmat photos continued to circulate. Analysts pointed out details others had missed. One figure's suit appeared newer, shinier than the rest, perhaps indicating mixed equipment from different sources. Another photo, from a different angle, showed what looked like scientific instruments being carried into the building. Was this an attempt at containment or study? Theories collided, merged, mutated. For every answer, 10 new questions emerged. As the days passed, the entity seemed to grow bolder in Chin's videos. In one clip, it pressed against the safe's transparent panel so forcefully that it left faint scratches on the surface. In another, it split, dividing into two smaller masses before merging again, as though testing its own limits. Viewers were horrified, fascinated, transfixed. If this was alive, what kind of organism could behave this way? And if it wasn't alive, what kind of technology had humanity stumbled upon? Rumors swirled that Chin had stopped responding to messages, that his social media accounts were being monitored, that his uploads were being throttled or suppressed by unseen forces. Whether true or not, the whispers added to the atmosphere of paranoia. It felt to many as though something was closing in. In forums and comment sections, a new narrative began to emerge. It was no longer about curiosity. It was about control. Theories suggested that whatever the entity was, biological or technological, it represented something too important to be left in the hands of one man. Governments would want it. Corporations would want it. Secretive groups would stop at nothing to secure it. And if Chin stood in the way, he would vanish, just like the meteorite itself. By the end of the second week, the black goo was no longer just a mystery. It was a symbol, a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest fears and desires. To some, it was proof we were not alone in the universe. To others, it was evidence of a technology so advanced it could shift the balance of power forever. And to many, it was simply another story waiting to be buried, another truth destined to be hidden. The debate was fierce. Was this the beginning of first contact, the unveiling of alien technology, or the setup for the greatest cover-up of the 21st century? Whatever the answer, one fact remained certain. Chin's discovery was no longer his alone. The world was watching, the hazmat suits were on the ground, and the black goo was awake. They thought it would all fade away, that the noise of the internet would die down, that people would forget. But instead, it only grew. The photograph of the hazmat team in Panama didn't silence the debate. It ignited it. Forums that once mocked Chin's claims began archiving every frame of his videos, every word he had ever said. Researchers, journalists, and even amateur investigators began digging into Panama's official reports, hospital records, and geological surveys. And then, the leaks began. A supposed hospital worker, their voice altered, their face hidden in shadow, posted a video claiming that in a facility just outside Panama City, patients had been brought in with symptoms doctors couldn't explain. Their bodies had developed rashes, black, vein-like patterns that spread beneath the skin. Some patients reported hearing sounds no one else could hear, whispers, faint and metallic, like radio signals caught in static. Others spoke of dreams, dreams of vast, dark oceans, dreams of stars twisting and folding in on themselves. And all of them, every patient, had lived near the site where Chin said he found the meteorite. The video spread like wildfire. News outlets dismissed it as fear-mongering. Government spokespeople refused to comment. But the damage was done. The public's imagination was now locked onto a single idea. The black goo was not just alive, it was spreading. Days later, Chin returned, his face on camera, his voice trembling, not with fear this time, but with urgency. "They came for me," he whispered. "They searched my home." Behind him, the room looked different. His shelves were bare. The safe where the goo had once been locked away was gone. He refused to say more. He refused to explain how he escaped. But then he leaned close to the lens and uttered words that sent chills through every listener. "It's not contained anymore." The video ended. The next morning, Panama woke to the sound of helicopters. Witnesses described unmarked trucks moving through narrow roads, escorted by armored vehicles. A military presence. But whose military, no one could say. The uniforms had no flags, no insignias. Some swore they saw American Blackhawks. Others insisted they recognized NATO equipment. But one thing was certain, the area around the alleged crash site was now sealed. Entire villages were blocked from leaving. Satellite imagery showed strange tents erected in the jungle, their white canvas glinting beneath the sun. From above, the ground appeared scarred, as though something had burned its way out of the earth. And yet, no official statement came, not from Panama, not from the US, not from anyone. Then, a second leak. This time, grainy footage. A handheld phone camera, its lens shaking. The clip showed a group of soldiers, or what appeared to be soldiers, standing outside one of the tents. Their rifles were drawn, aimed inward. Inside the tent, shadows moved. Not human shadows. The figures seemed too thin, too elongated. And then, for a split second, something glistened. A black, rippling surface. Shifting. Flowing like liquid. And then, the camera cut to static. The uploader of the video vanished the next day. Their account deleted. Their email gone. Their name erased. Scientists began to speculate. Some argued the goo might be a form of extremophile, a life form capable of surviving in space. Others suggested it was no life form at all, but a form of programmable matter. A machine. Self-organizing. Self-replicating. And the behavior reported from inside the tent only fueled their theories. Soldiers claimed that when light struck the substance, it moved. When heat touched it, it recoiled. And when electricity was introduced, even something as simple as a spark, the goo responded instantly, as though feeding on energy itself. It was as if it was learning. And perhaps most chilling of all, every sample removed from the site disappeared. No records, no research papers, nothing. Just silence. But silence in the age of the internet is never enough. Hackers began targeting Panamanian networks. Entire databases were stolen and leaked online. Among them, one file stood out. It contained a series of photographs, time-stamped and watermarked with what appeared to be government seals. The images showed lab equipment, glass containers, and inside them, fragments of the goo. In one photo, the goo stretched upward, as though trying to reach the camera lens. In another, it had split into two separate forms. But the most disturbing image showed something else. A rat. Or rather, what had once been a rat. Its body lay limp, its fur matted with black. But its eyes, wide, bulging, glowed faintly, almost metallic, as though something had replaced them from within. The caption below read only one word: assimilation. The leak confirmed what many had feared. This was no meteorite. This was no accident. This was an invasion. But was it alien? Or was it something worse? A secret weapon? A man-made experiment gone wrong? No one could agree. And yet, as the world argued, Panama itself began to change. Villagers on the outskirts of the sealed zone reported strange phenomena. Radios crackled with voices no one recognized. Streetlights flickered without cause. Compasses spun wildly. And in the stillness of night, people swore they heard something moving in the jungle, not footsteps, not animals, but a low, metallic hum. A vibration that set the air itself trembling. And always, the black streaks. Small, oily stains appearing on rocks, on leaves, even on water. As if the goo was no longer confined to the meteorite, as if it was spreading. At this point, Chin vanished entirely. His channel was wiped, his videos deleted. Only mirrored re-uploads kept his warnings alive. Some claimed he had been taken. Others whispered that he had gone underground. But his last message lingered. It's not contained anymore. The climax of Part 3 builds here. Now, the world was no longer asking if the goo was real. The question had changed. How much time was left before it reached beyond Panama? Global reaction, media blackout, and first sightings beyond Panama. The Panama story was no longer just a local mystery. It was becoming a global crisis. When the hazmat photographs first spread online, many dismissed them as conspiracy fuel. But now, with leaked files, grainy videos, and Chin's disappearance, the narrative could no longer be contained. The problem wasn't whether the goo existed, it was that governments around the world were staying silent, and silence, in the age of instant communication, breeds suspicion. The blackout. It started with Panama itself. Within days of the military lockdown, the internet in several provinces went dark. Entire towns found their connections throttled or shut off completely. Journalists who tried to enter were stopped at checkpoints and turned away. A few who slipped through described eerie conditions: villages abandoned, livestock left to wander freely, homes stripped of belongings as if their owners had left in a hurry. And in the distance, faint columns of smoke rising from the sealed zone. Then, news outlets outside Panama began pulling stories. Articles that had been published hours before suddenly vanished, replaced with vague statements about editorial review. A popular news anchor, who dared to mention the leaked hospital files on air, was cut mid-broadcast. The camera froze, and when the program resumed, she was gone. No explanation, no apology. It was as if the world's media had received a single order: erase Panama. The leaks grow stronger. But the harder they tried to erase, the more people dug. Hackers continued to breach government systems, and another file surfaced, this time a series of audio recordings. In one, a man's voice trembled as he spoke into a radio. "It's in the power grid. Do you hear me? It's in the lines." A second voice cut in, urgent, almost shouting, "Shut it down! Shut it!" The transmission ended in static. Another recording was shorter, but more terrifying. It captured what sounded like screams in the distance, followed by a deep metallic resonance, a sound not unlike a massive engine turning, but far too organic to be a machine. For many, this was confirmation that the black goo wasn't just alive. It was intelligent, and it was adapting. The first sightings abroad. The panic escalated when reports emerged from Colombia. Farmers along the border described strange stains appearing in their fields, pools of water that shimmered black even under the midday sun. One witness claimed he saw a bird land near the fluid, only for the creature to stagger, convulse, and fly off with a strange metallic sheen on its feathers. Then came Costa Rica. A viral video showed beachgoers gathering around a tide pool. Inside, the water swirled unnaturally, dark, inky, moving against the flow of the waves. At first, people laughed, assuming it was pollution, but then the water rose. Like a hand reaching upward, the black surface extended, dripping and quivering, before collapsing back into the pool. The video ended with screams as the crowd scattered. Governments react. Suddenly, silence was no longer an option. The United States released a carefully worded statement. "There is no evidence of extraterrestrial contamination in Panama." A phrase that only fueled the fire. Why mention extraterrestrial contamination at all, unless there was something to hide? The Panamanian government issued its own denial, insisting the military presence was part of a routine training exercise. But locals contradicted this instantly, describing blocked roads, forced evacuations, and unmarked helicopters flying low over their villages. And then NATO was mentioned. Unconfirmed reports suggested that joint forces had established a containment perimeter, a phrase chilling in its vagueness. Containment of what? The whispers of Roswell. Historians and UFO researchers began drawing comparisons to Roswell. In 1947, a supposed crash in New Mexico had been denied, ridiculed, and buried under decades of secrecy. Now Panama seemed to be repeating the pattern. Only this time, the evidence wasn't a single crash site. It was spreading, and the whispers grew louder. If governments were so desperate to control the narrative, what were they afraid the world would discover? Chin's ghost. As the media blackout tightened, Chin's name resurfaced. Though his channel had been wiped, fragments of his videos lived on through re-uploads. One particular clip, where the black goo stretched toward the camera inside his safe, was analyzed frame by frame. Experts noticed something Chin had never mentioned. In the reflection of the safe's glass, faint, almost imperceptible shapes flickered. Not random distortions, but symmetrical patterns, like symbols, symbols no one could identify. For some, it was proof the goo was trying to communicate. For others, it was a chilling reminder that Chin's disappearance was no coincidence. He had shown the world too much. They change effects. And then came the electromagnetic disturbances. Panama's neighbors began experiencing sudden blackouts. Power grids surged and failed without explanation. Radio towers emitted garbled signals, often interrupted by a strange hum. Pilots reported instruments malfunctioning when flying near the region, compasses spinning, altimeters giving impossible readings. In one chilling case, a commercial flight over the Caribbean was briefly diverted after passengers described seeing a black shimmer in the clouds. The cockpit crew confirmed they had lost radio contact for several minutes. When the plane landed, technicians discovered a thin, oily residue on parts of the fuselage. The airline issued no official comment. A world on edge. By now, the world was divided into two camps. One camp believed this was the beginning of disclosure, proof that humanity was not alone, and that governments were scrambling to cover up first contact. The other camp believed something darker, that this wasn't alien at all, but a weapon. A technology humanity itself had created, now unleashed by accident or by design. Either way, the message was clear. Whatever was happening in Panama could no longer be contained. The question was no longer if the black goo would spread. The question was, how far has it already gone? The world could no longer look away. What began as whispers on obscure forums had grown into the biggest story on the planet. Every news channel, whether they admitted it or not, was running with the same thread. Panama, the black goo, and the silence that screamed louder than any official denial. And then came the first wave of global attention. Mass curiosity becomes mass panic. Millions watched the re-uploads of Chin's last videos. Millions more pored over the hazmat photographs, dissecting them like crime scene evidence. Reddit threads ballooned into hundreds of thousands of comments. TikTok feeds flooded with slowed-down clips of the goo stretching and pulsing. But curiosity quickly gave way to something else. Fear. Because suddenly, the phenomenon wasn't confined to Panama anymore. Strange lights over Europe. It began quietly in Denmark. A pilot reported seeing shimmering streaks in the sky, like liquid black lightning. Days later, videos surfaced of glowing orbs hovering above Copenhagen. At first, many dismissed them as drones, but the footage showed something unnerving. When the lights appeared, nearby car alarms triggered, cell phones lost signal, and entire neighborhoods experienced rolling blackouts. And in the background of one video, if you listened closely, you could hear it. That low hum. The same one recorded in the leaked Panama files. It wasn't just in Denmark. Reports followed from Germany, France, even the UK. The same shimmering, the same electromagnetic surges. The Panama incident was no longer a local mystery. It had gone continental. Electromagnetic chaos. The disturbances spread faster than anyone expected. Hospitals across Europe reported sudden failures in equipment. Pacemakers misfired. Elevators froze between floors. A live football match in Spain went viral for an entirely different reason. Halfway through the game, every stadium light went out. When the broadcast resumed seconds later, the cameras captured something drifting above the arena. Not a drone, not a plane. A mass of black, shifting liquid suspended in the night sky. It rippled, it pulsed, and then it was gone. The feed cut to commercials. The network issued a statement blaming technical issues. But by then, the footage had already been ripped and shared millions of times. New eyewitness footage. The most chilling video surfaced from Panama itself. Filmed secretly from a window, it showed a military convoy transporting a massive container on the back of a truck. The container was shaking violently, metal groaning as if something inside was pushing outward. Soldiers surrounded it, weapons raised, shouting orders. Then, in the grainy footage, the container split. For just a fraction of a second, something poured out. A wave of black liquid, but moving with intent, like dozens of limbs unfurling at once. The soldiers opened fire. Gunshots cracked the night. The witness screamed, and the video ended. It lasted only 30 seconds, But that 30 seconds was enough to terrify the world. The NATO response. The question now was not if, but how fast governments would respond. NATO issued its first official statement, vague and cautious. Unusual aerial and environmental phenomena are being investigated. Civilian populations should not be alarmed. But actions spoke louder than words. Troops were deployed in unprecedented numbers. Surveillance aircraft circled Panama, Colombia, and the Caribbean. Unmarked ships appeared along coastlines. Satellite images revealed massive structures being erected. Containment domes, some said, designed to trap whatever had escaped. Unofficial leaks claimed that NATO wasn't preparing for study. They were preparing for war. The whispers of a response plan. Insiders spoke of Operation Black Shield, a rumored contingency designed not to capture, but to eliminate. If the goo spread beyond control, NATO was prepared to use weapons of last resort. The thought alone sent shivers down the internet. Nuclear strikes, electromagnetic pulses, weapons designed not for humans, but for something else. But others warned that any such attack could make things worse. What if the goo fed on energy? What if explosions only accelerated its growth? Humanity on the edge. The narrative fractured. Some saw the goo as a threat, an invading organism that needed to be destroyed at all costs. Others saw it as the single most important discovery in human history, proof of alien intelligence that must be preserved. And then there were those who feared something worse, that the black goo wasn't alien at all, but a human creation, unleashed into the world by accident. Whichever version was true, one thing was clear. The black goo was no longer confined to Panama. It was here. It was everywhere. And the world was running out of time. The world was no longer the same. For weeks, the black goo had been a curiosity, a mystery tucked away in Panama. Chin's shaky videos, the photographs of hazmat teams, the whispers of containment. But now, it had become something more. Something no government could hide, something no skeptic could deny. Global breakdown. By the time NATO forces began moving into Panama in full strength, panic had already taken hold across the world. Flights were canceled en masse. Airports stood deserted under military watch. Schools closed, not because of illness, but because parents refused to send their children into buildings where electronic systems could fail at any second. The financial markets trembled. Oil, tech, and defense companies soared as panic buying set in, while tourism and global travel collapsed. But nothing compared to the chaos on the streets. Every night, thousands gathered in city squares, holding signs that read, "Tell us the truth." In New York, London, Paris, Berlin, the same chant echoed, "What is the black goo?" Governments tried to silence the protests, but live streams kept them alive. Chin returns. And then, Chin returned. After weeks of silence, his channel suddenly went live. No announcement, no warning. Just the flicker of his familiar safe in the dim light of his room. The chat exploded. Tens of thousands poured in within seconds. And then the stream cut to black. The electromagnetic storm. Almost immediately, reports came in. Entire grids in Panama failed. Power plants went offline. Cell towers sparked and collapsed. And on satellite feeds, analysts claimed to see a surge, a wave of energy radiating outward from the jungle, as if the Earth itself had been struck by something alien. But what terrified people most wasn't the energy wave itself. It was the aftermath. Every compass in the region spun wildly. Birds fell from the skies, and in one chilling clip from a stranded motorist, dozens of cars were seen stalled along a highway, while a massive black cloud hung low above the trees. Not smoke, not weather, the goo. Expanding, whispers of the impossible. Theories multiplied like wildfire. Some believed the goo was a biological weapon, a failed experiment unleashed. Others insisted it was proof of extraterrestrial origin, a life form carried on a meteorite, finally awakening. And then came the darkest theory of all, that the goo wasn't new, that it had always been here, buried, sleeping, waiting. And that Chin had only stumbled upon something humanity was never meant to touch. NATO's decision. As electromagnetic disturbances spread across Central and South America, NATO's silence finally broke. A single leaked document revealed a terrifying line of text. Containment impossible. Initiating Red Protocol. What was Red Protocol? No one knew. Some whispered nuclear strikes. Others feared an EMP so powerful it could knock out electronics worldwide. A final act of desperation. Not to win, but to prevent the goo from spreading further. But many feared it was already too late. Humanity at the edge. And so the world held its breath. Every headline, every post, every whisper of the black goo consumed humanity's attention. In living rooms, people stared at their phones, watching the endless stream of leaked footage. Soldiers firing into the night, convoys disappearing into the jungle, entire cities plunged into darkness. It was no longer a mystery. It was survival. The final cliffhanger. The last chilling piece of footage came not from Panama, but from somewhere far away. Uploaded anonymously, it showed a family kitchen in Denmark. A simple home video, shaky and grainy. The camera focused on a bowl of water left on the counter. At first, it seemed normal. But then, the water rippled, moved, and slowly, something black began to swirl inside it. Thin veins, like ink spreading. The person holding the camera whispered, "It's here." The video ended. Outro. In Panama, it began with a meteorite, a fragment of the cosmos crashing into our world. But what emerged from that rock was not simply alien, and not simply technology. It was something else, something we still cannot define. Now it spreads, across borders, across oceans, across lives. Maybe it is alive. Maybe it is a machine. Maybe it is both. But one thing is certain. This mystery no longer belongs to Panama. It belongs to all of us. Fade to black. Roll credits.